The film opens with a class of students taking a test. At one point, a short-haired girl stares at a classmate. She then is awakened by another student who informs her that a professor is calling her to his office. The professor tells her that she has chosen a very difficult major, and her grades are not high enough, so he suggests she choose something easier. The scene shifts to another student, the blogger, who records a video in which he talks about the test he took. The blogger irritates everyone with his tasteless jokes, and then approaches the main character, the short-haired girl. She tells him to leave her alone, and then prepares to go home, but notices the girl she saw in her dreams. Then we find out that the girl doesn't actually exist, and only the main character sees her. Later that evening, the protagonist is studying when she suddenly hears mysterious noises. When she looks around, she doesn't notice anything strange, but continues to hear the noise. Soon after, she spots a white hand under the table. As the short-haired girl backs away, the frightening entity gets closer and closer. The protagonist suddenly wakes up and realizes that it was just a nightmare. Then she looks under the table, but finds no one. Later, the protagonist goes to talk to a friend, Min-woo, and tells him about the nightmares she is having. It turns out that the protagonist's best friend died recently, and now she appears in her nightmares. Min-woo tells her that after the exams, they should go somewhere to relax. After the death of her best friend, the protagonist's school performance dropped, and now she feels discouraged. However, Min-woo tells her not to give up and assures her that everything will be fine. A few days later, Min-woo and the short-haired girl play video games to relieve the stress. Later, they meet the other classmates who invite them to join an adventure. On the other hand, the class geek proposes to the short-haired girl that they study together for the upcoming exam. Nevertheless, Min-woo tells him not to bring up this topic. Later, the group stops at a bar and decides to plan a small vacation over the weekend. Finally, they decide to visit the sea during the winter, but the problem is that they don't have a car. The geek reveals that he has a driver's license and they can take his mother's van. The friends ask the short-haired girl if she will join them, but she says she should prepare for the exam. Later that evening, while the short-haired girl is studying, the friends try to convince her to change her mind. The offer is tempting, but she knows she should study. Then she flips through the album with photos of her and her deceased best friend. The protagonist remembers that the last time she saw her, she refused to go out and have fun with her and chose to study. So now she decides not to make the same choice and joins her friends on the trip. A few hours later, the geek comes to a point where the road splits into different routes. Since the navigational device does not work, the geek decides to randomly take the path to the left. The group stops at a parking lot and realizes that they have taken the wrong turn. Soon after, they find an amusement park and decide to have fun. While watching a merry-go-round, the short-haired girl remembers how she used to have fun together with her best friend. Then the protagonist sees a horror tunnel and decides to go inside, but Min-woo stops her. She says she hears voices, and Min-woo grabs her and walks away. Meanwhile, the geek is in the van and hears strange noises. He thinks it is a prank, but when he turns around, he sees a woman outside. The lady tells the group that they cannot be here, and they reveal that they are lost. She asks worriedly if they have touched anything, and they say no. Then they get into the van and continue their journey. In the car, a boy finds out the history of this amusement park. It turns out that a couple planned to build an amusement park, but a lady warned them that the construction site is a portal through which spirits can get out. The couple did not heed the woman's warnings and built the amusement park to its end. In fact, they use local legends to attract people, saying that there are real spirits inside the amusement park. Initially, the plan worked and people were curious to visit the amusement park. However, the couple was soon punished by the ghosts for not heeding the lady's warnings. They were found dead in the ghost house inside the amusement park. The blogger proposes to spend the night inside the ghost house to become famous on the internet. That night, they return to the amusement park and wander around. They find the ghost house and enter it excitedly. They find the usual things that are in houses of horror, fake blood, mannequins, and other scary things as they go deeper into the tunnel. The door behind them closes, but the group thinks it is just the wind. The blogger suggests they do a live stream where they have to pretend they are being haunted by ghosts so they can get lots of views on social media. At one point, the protagonist receives a phone call from her mother who is outraged that she's not studying. The protagonist has an emotional breakdown and explains to her mother that she needs to relax after all that has happened. Soon after, the protagonist hears the voice of her best friend telling her to get out of here. Suddenly, a little girl appears who's looking for her mother. Meanwhile, the blogger and the other members of the group continue to record the video. Min-woo calls the short-haired girl and asks her where she is. At that moment, the little girl is showing the protagonist where she last saw her mother. The protagonist calls the police and reports the little girl's mother missing. The police officer states that he cannot hear anything because of the noise of people around the protagonist. However, there is deadly silence inside the tunnel. Then, the call is interrupted by a high-pitched sound. Meanwhile, the blogger and others continue to venture into the tunnel while recording everything. Min-woo finds what looks like human hair and they run off in fright. Shortly after, the blogger frames a coffin, inside of which is their friend. A girl accidentally moves a lever, and the coffin begins to descend into a dark hole. Next, hands pop out of the darkness, terrorizing the guy in the coffin. Soon after, the ropes holding the coffin break, and the guy falls down deeply into the dark hole. Meanwhile, another friend of theirs is waiting for the blogger to arrive inside a pyramid. Suddenly, he hears noises and thinks it is his friends, but then we see a bloody ball. The scene shifts to the boy in the fallen coffin. He is still alive, and his friends are trying to find a way to pull him up. The blogger suggests they record a video and say it was a prank. Enraged, Min-woo punches him in the face. Min-woo blames him for being a selfish man who thinks only of his social media following and then leaves to look for others. The scene shifts to a man dressed in a suit dragging one of the friends. The guy wakes up, and when he sees the man, he runs away scared. It turns out that the man in the suit is the ghost of the ride's owner. In the process, the blogger begins to be haunted by a ghost talking to him. Soon after, the dummies around him begin to fall to the ground, scaring him even more. The protagonist is still walking along with the little girl, and at one point, she hears a loud scream. The little girl tells her to ignore the voices because then the ghost will think she is one of them. She then tells her to go on, and shortly after, they arrive at the tent in which the little girl is sleeping. Next, the little girl sees her mother arrive and goes to hug her. The protagonist observes the woman and sees that she too is a ghost. The protagonist hides in a box, and suddenly, the little girl and her mother appear beside her. The protagonist runs away while the little girl continues to chase after her to play. In the process, the blogger wakes up, and the ghost of the amusement park owner appears before him. The scene stops and shifts to the protagonist, who arrives in a room where ghosts do not enter. An unknown woman reveals to her that the ghosts are afraid to enter here. The unknown woman calms her down and tells her that she too is trapped here, but they must keep calm if they want to escape. Furthermore, she states that this ride is full of ghosts, and they don't even know that they are dead. Then they go to the nearby room, where they find photos of the owner of the amusement park together with his family. At that moment, the unknown woman tells her that soon the portal will close, and they must escape as soon as possible, otherwise they will be trapped here forever. The protagonist begs her to help her look for her friends, after which they will go out together. The unknown woman agrees to help her and warns her not to talk to the dead. In the process, Min-woo finds his friend trapped in the coffin and helps him get out. When Min-woo tries to lift his friend, a ghost appears and attacks him. Min-woo tries to stop the ghosts, but is powerless against it. Thus, the ghost destroys the face of Min-woo's friend. The scene shifts to the protagonist and the unknown woman, who are running through the tunnel. At one point, they hear the little girl laughing. In fact, the little devil appears shortly after and scares them away. In the process, a friend of the group finds a room and locks himself inside. He soon realizes it was a mistake because he begins to hear noises. Soon after, he tries to open the door, but it is already locked. Meanwhile, a voice keeps telling him not to open the door. Then the ghost of a girl with a white face appears and shouts not to open the door. In the next scene, the protagonist and the unknown woman find Min-woo. The protagonist says that the unknown woman will help them run away. Min-woo is confused and says there is no one else here but the two of them. The protagonist realizes that the unknown woman is actually a ghost as well. Meanwhile, the attractive girl in the group finds one of their companions, but his face is completely smashed and full of blood. Terrified, the attractive girl runs away. Soon after, Min-woo and the protagonist find her, but the attractive girl is going crazy. In fact, she locks the door, blocking herself inside the tunnel. In the process, a ghost appears behind the attractive girl and grabs her neck, after which she kills her. Later, the protagonist and Min-woo find the blogger. The latter, apparently possessed, attacks Min-woo, hitting him in the head. Then the blogger tries to pull his eyes out, but the protagonist hits him in the head, knocking him unconscious. Soon after they approach the exit, they hear the voices of their friends' ghosts. The protagonist says to ignore them and continues walking. But they soon realize that the way out is closing. Fortunately, they manage to get there in time and hold the gate. Soon after, the protagonist spots the ghost of her best friend, who is trapped in this scary place. Another terrifying ghost appears and tries to lure the protagonist into the darkness. On the other hand, Min-woo tells her to leave because he can no longer hold the gate. Nevertheless, the protagonist decides to go with her best friend. The film ends with Min-woo, the sole survivor, collapsing, exhausted, as he hears the protagonist's voice. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Hit that notification bell for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next scary story.